There are many motorcycle museums all over the country, but when you talk about motocross motorcycles, a few names keep coming up. Number one is Tom White. Tom White discovered his lifelong passion for motorcycles at an early age, and after selling his successful White Brothers business in 2000, he turned his attention towards restoring and collecting vintage motocross bikes. White's early years of Motocross Museum, located on his family's private property in Orange County, California, is not open to the public, but it has played host to motorcycle industry events, including product launches, professional racing media gatherings, as well as numerous charity fundraising efforts. Tom passed away in late 2017, and his family decided to keep the early years of Motocross Museum open. They plan to host industry and fundraising events there, just like Tom did. We hope that Tom's life story serves as an inspiration to everyone that fierce determination and goodwill can yield a life extraordinarily well lived. Next up, from Indianapolis, Indiana, is a friend of mine, Chris McCallister. On February 23, 2019, I was invited to a night of watching on any Sunday, enjoying pizza and to view his impressive collection. Chris's heart and roots go back to the early days of motocross in the U.S., where he, like most of us, ate, slept, and breathed motocross. Chris has established a very impressive 75-plus bike collection that specializes in Husqvarnas, including an extremely rare one of 16 built, only 3 known to exist today. It's a 1962 Husky 500 4-stroke built by Nessie Headland. Many of his bikes are very low-hour originals, but the ones that are restored are absolutely spot on. One of his Huskies is the bike used by Steve McQueen in the movie On Any Sunday. He has the Enduro Entry application, which is dated November the 6th, 1970, and signed by Steve McQueen. Next up, Rick Smits, born on the 23rd of August, 1966, nicknamed the Duncan Dutchman, is a Dutch former professional basketball player who spent his entire career with the Indiana Pacers of the National Basketball Association. I have had the pleasure to see Rick's museum when he lived in Zionsville, Indiana. Rick resides in Arizona now. Rick, since moving to Arizona, has downsized his collection. Rick always hosted the swap meet in Lebanon, Indiana, and it is such a great event for fans of vintage motorcycles to get a booth and sell their wares and see friends. I have had a booth at this event on several different occasions. One year I bought a 72 Hodaka 125 Wombat from Rick and completely restored this bike. And when I picked it up at his house, he took me to his barn to see his collection. The pictures are of some of the bikes at the swap meet. Smits has been a collector his whole life, and it is really neat to see all the great riding he is doing in Arizona.
The next gentleman's story is a man who will go down in motocross history as the man with the most toys wins. That man is Terry Good. Here is his story.
Terry first got interested in motocross in 1971. That was the year I graduated high school. Terry rode in the trails with his dad that year on a 1970 Yamaha HS1 90cc twin at the family summer house in northern Michigan. After reading motorcycle magazines for a year or so about motocross champions like Gary Jones, Joel Robert, and Roger DeCoster, Terry finally entered his first motorcycle race on Memorial Day, 1972 in Oscoda, Michigan. It was the roughest track Terry had ever ridden. Mike Hartwig was there. The Wilsons from K&W Cycle were also some of the best riders at the time were there. Terry got 15th overall in the 250cc class on a Yamaha 175 Enduro with a Webco expansion chamber on it. Terry was hooked. Terry sold the 175 and saved and bought a Yamaha DT2MX. Around that same time, a guy by the name of Barry Watkins, with the help of Don Jones, who's the father of Gary, was writing articles in Cycle Guide magazine about making your 250MX lightweight, similar to the factory Yamaha YZs that the Jones brothers were riding. Terry could buy parts at the Jones Motocross Product Shop in Walnut, California. Terry was making $1.90 an hour as a construction laborer in West Bloomfield, Michigan. Terry saved up every penny he made and bought every item Jones sold. Terry did everything he could to make his 1972 DT2MX Yamaha exactly like Gary Jones's factory YZ. From that point on, Terry was enamored with works bikes. Motocross at the time was the fastest growing motorsport in the United States, and it was not uncommon to have over 1,000 entries at a single motocross race. Terry's dream was to go to California, which was the motocross mecca of the United States, and ride at Saddleback and all of those other places he had read about in the magazines. Motocross in Southern California at that time was actually a part of the local culture. Celebrities such as Steve McQueen could be found racing at local races on a weekly basis, just blending in with everybody else. From San Fernando Valley to San Diego, you could race 4 or 5 times a week, and the competition was very tough. Terry planned with a few friends to Michigan to go to California, but they eventually bailed out. Terry kept racing in Michigan and Ohio and got pretty good, and finally turned pro in the spring of 1975. In 1975, Terry was 18 years old. He had a 1972 Chevy van, a 1975 Yamaha YZ250B, and $900 to his name. One day in June that year, he decided now was the time. He just had to do this. He loaded up the bike and told his parents he was going to California. Terry didn't know anybody there, but after 3 days of driving, he arrived at Saddleback Park in Orange County in total awe. It was a Saddleback Saturday where they ran 40-minute motos for the pros. Tim Hart was there on a Works monoshock. Rich Aristat was there too. These guys were fast. The competition at the pro level was insane, and you learned real fast. One day at Saddleback, Terry met a guy named Glenn Appling and got to be friends with him and his family. Next thing he knew, Glenn invited Terry to live with them at their home in Santa Ana. The Applings, some of the nicest people Terry ever met, became his family in California. Glenn Sr., his wife Betty, the 3 girls, Jan, Kim, and Candace, and Glenn Jr. They were totally into the local motocross scene. His son, Glenn Jr., had a bike just like Terry's, and they did all the Saddleback, Carlsbad, CMC, and OCIR night races at least 3 races a week. What a blast. Each race you would see Marty Smith, Pierre Carsmakers, and a whole host of factory riders with works bikes at local races. Terry remembers seeing Bob Hanna test the RM pre-production Suzukis. Bob Hanna was winning every single race, and no one knew who he was. Everyone thought he was just a guy that would come and go. Terry thought he was for real and was probably his first fan. Terry remembers hearing the announcer at Saddleback call him the Hurricane Hanna for the first time. The story of him getting that name in Hangtown or Florida is wrong. Terry stayed there for about 6 months and then back to Michigan to get ready for the 1976 125 Nationals. Terry planned on competing in this series with another friend he had met in California, Kim Blackseth. Kim loved fast things. As a young man, Kim was an avid and accomplished professional dirt bike racer, earning sponsorship from KTM. A devastating racing accident left him a quadriplegic for the remainder of his life. Even after the accident, Kim pursued his passion for speed. He took up rally racing, autocross, and amazingly enough, flying. he learned his private pilot license after soloing in his own 1947 Coupe. A life well lived. Once back in Michigan, Terry bought a Yamaha YZ125X model and started training. Terry missed the first national at Hangtown in Northern California due to logistics. Kim raced there as he hadn't gone back east yet. He called Terry up after the race and said, "You're not going to believe who won. Bob Hanna. He's got this works water-cooled Yamaha. You won't believe it. I saw the bike for the first time at Redbud, the second 125 national event. It was so far ahead of its time, with many cutting-edge innovations that were inconceivable just a short time earlier." The bike is now a part of Terry's collection. Hanna and Smith would battle all year. The battles between those two were much closer than history would have you believe. Bob Hanna was fantastic, but so was Marty Smith. Marty had a lot of bad luck, but Bob probably would have won no matter what. He was unbelievable, and his bike was far ahead of the Honda at first. But at Delta, Ohio, Marty had the brand new state-of-the-art Honda RC 125M Type 2, also now part of Terry's collection. That bike was every bit as good as Hanna's OW27, and in some ways maybe better. These bikes cost as much as the median price of a single-family home in 1976 at over $40,000 each. Kim had some family issues and had to go back home to California, but Terry decided to continue on with the series. Brock Glover was riding for DG, and his dad, Dick Glover, was driving the DG box van to each race. Dick took a liking to Terry and started helping him out with pipes and parts, etc. What an experience that year was for Terry. In between nationals that year, Terry met his wife Cindy, and in March of 1977, they got married. Terry moved back to California again in 77, but that fell apart as Terry could barely afford to pay the rent. He worked as a framer and moved up to superintendent and eventually started his own successful framing company. One day, Terry was invited by Glenn Appling to Riverside Raceway to watch Kenny Roberts race an AMA National Road Race. On the way home, they stopped by a friend of Glenn's named Ron Crandall, who lived near the track. Ron was also the race director at Corona Raceway. While there, Terry noticed a works Yamaha in his backyard leaning against a detached garage. Terry asked him about it, and he said that it was Pierre Carsmakers, and that Bob Hanna raced it for a while when he had first signed with Yamaha. Terry believed the Carsmakers part, but since Bob was the big star at the time, Terry thought he was just making that part up. It took Terry about a year to talk him out of it. 1 year and $650 later, it was Terry Good's bike. In 1978, Terry owned his very first works bike. This was the bike that started his collection. Years later, Terry brought this up while talking to Bob. It was true. It was his. Yamaha gave him Bruce McDougall's 125 and Pierre's 250 in the fall of 1975 when he first signed with them. Terry and Bob were both comparing little details that only Bob and Terry would know about that bike. It was absolutely amazing. Terry eventually changed careers and moved to Chicago. As a hobby, Terry started a mail order company that imported Technocell seats and graphics sets from Italy into the U.S. Great excuse to make many trips to Italy. Terry also sold other trick parts for a while and became the U.S. Mugen importer. Mugen was owned by Hirotoshi Honda, the son of Soichiro Honda. To promote all of this, Terry built a super trick aluminum-framed CR250 Honda, and Motocross Action magazine did an article on it. It was a cool bike, and in many ways, it was ahead of its time because of the aluminum frame that was built in Italy. Terry also sponsored Ty Davis in 1990 and 1991, and they won the AMA 125 West Coast Supercross title in 1990. Terry and Ty's rival was eventual superstar Jeremy McGrath. Throughout all of this, Dave Arnold, Roger DeCoster, and Terry became good friends. At the same time, Terry was also getting a lot of leads through the mail order business on Works bikes. People were associating Terry with Works bikes because of the bike he had built that was in motocross action. Other than the Mugen, Terry didn't get the next one until 1991. From there, it just snowballed into what it is today, and the collection is still growing. Terry has really been driven to preserve what has been so special to him and many others all these years. Terry, from 1972 to today, meets people from all walks of life that are in awe of his collection. Terry will tell you himself that he has met the nicest people and has established great friendships with great champions from the golden era of motocross.